Welcome to another episode of PAX Panel, sponsored by Panasonic Avionics. My name is Robynne Trueman. I'm the business editor for PAX Tech Magazine. And today's episode, PAX Panel Next Gen Networks, will focus on the benefits of LEO satellite connectivity and how it's impacting the IFC landscape. I have an incredible panel of industry experts with me today to speak on this topic. So without further ado, I would like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. Alex Polito. Thank you very much for having me. I work for Eutelsat as the Business Development Director for the Americas in Aviation.
I'll go. My name is Ken McQuillan. I work at JetBlue Airways. I manage the IFE&C operations and implementation team.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Sare. I am the Chief Commercial Officer at ThinKom.
And I'm John Wade, and I am Vice President of IFC for Panasonic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. So let's start off by talking about some of the key performance advantages of LEO versus MEO or GEO, and how do they differ most from a passenger perspective. John, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I think the primary difference is latency, the secondary difference is latency, and the third difference is latency. It really is all about latency. For those of you who have been fortunate enough to use a LEO constellation, you'll know that the latency makes all the difference. You can compare 100 megabit per second GEO link to 100 megabit per second LEO link, and it feels just like a different experience. You're not spending time waiting for that signal to go all the way up to the GEO satellites. Latency is measured in under 100 milliseconds as opposed to 700 milliseconds, which we've had historically. And it just makes for a far snappier and more responsive user experience.
Fantastic. Alex, did you want to speak on this as well?
Certainly. Well, frankly, I couldn't agree more. I think latency is the cornerstone of the oomph behind the LEO experience. I think our network's been live for a little over almost the better part of a year now, and the feedback has been resounding, and because of that is the low latency driven experience. My favorite use case, so to speak, is gaming, and people who wish to engage in esports or any sort of multiplayer experience online. You got to have low latency and low packet loss. That's exactly what a LEO experience delivers.
Excellent. And what are some of the challenges around network management with LEO satellites, and how are you tackling those?
Yeah, so for us, it's obviously there's always an evolving regulatory landscape. We work very closely and spend a lot of time working with local regulators and with partners in country to help navigate that. And it's a little bit, I think, different from what has traditionally been experienced with GEO. We have a fantastic group of experts and a fantastic group of people that have been working very hard to ensure that service can be provided all the way down to the ground in many different countries.
And Ken, can you talk a little bit from the airline perspective about why that improvement with latency is so important?
Well, yeah, it's at JetBlue, one of the things I handle is I get feedback right from customers, and it's always that they'll say, hey, I did a speed test and you've got great speeds, but we just can't get things done. And it's taken me the past 3 or 4 years to kind of explain to everybody here, in the company and also a lot of our customers that it's not all about speed. In fact, it's very little about speed. It's all about the latency, and that is really going to be a game changer. And we look at it like it is going to change the entire game in connectivity, especially for airlines, because what used to be kind of a luxury is now demanded. You really can't fly anymore without having connectivity. And so I think that the low latency and other things that LEO brings is just going to change the game completely with airlines and what we have to offer. And I don't think there's never been a revolution quite like this. Some people think maybe we went from KU to KA, air to ground to KU, that type of thing. But this is tenfold a bigger change than any of that has been.
And Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about how LEO puts airlines in a better position to deliver speed and consistency to passengers in terms of hardware antennas?
Well, in terms of hardware antennas, I would argue that it's really not solely about the antenna, right? It really truly is about the constellation and the network. The way it puts the airline in a better position is that you not only have that lower latency, you have it consistently anywhere where there's coverage, which is at least in the orbits themselves truly global. Alex's comment situation notwithstanding, of course. So it not only provides that lower latency, but it provides that consistency regardless of where you're going, because you're not going to move from a satellite of a earlier generation to one of a later generation and then back to another one. You're not going to have those kinds of changes. So it adds another layer of consistency.
Awesome. Thank you. And so let's talk about the three C's of connectivity, cost, capacity, and coverage in the context of LEO. How important are each of these in delivering or selecting a service, and what are the trade-offs between the three? John, do you want to start us off?
Sure. And you really want to focus, I think, just on the three C's of Leo. Is that right? Or did you want to compare it to? Okay. Yeah, so as Jeff mentioned a minute ago, one of the things that the LEO constellations bring is because the satellites are traveling over the Earth, then you actually have a completely consistent fabric of coverage pole to pole. So once you got regulatory approval, you could actually operate your satellite constellation over any landmass. So it gives us the ability to have a coverage which hasn't been viable before. And with us, there's probably even another C you get added to it, which is consistency. And so you start getting a very consistent service as opposed to a very variable one. In terms of capacity, these satellites, while they're physically much smaller, the throughput that they can offer is radically different than anything we've seen before in terms of the space segment. Whether you're looking at the mega constellation of Starlink or the constellation of OneWeb, they bring terabits per second of capacity, which is orders of magnitude more than we've actually been using in IFC today. So, and that's only just going to keep going up and up and up. So that's going to be a tremendous change. And one of the things that I think is driving all of that is then the final C, which gets to cost, because when you've got much more capacity and you can use that capacity, so cost comes down. So the big transformative thing here that Ken was talking about earlier is satellite communications used to be the system of last resort. You'd only use it when there was nothing else you could use. So therefore it always lagged. Now, with these modern constellations, they're very comparable in terms of coverage, cost, and capacity and consistency to what we now experience terrestrially. So for the first time, satellite communications actually caught up with what we see in terms of terrestrial service. And that really, all told, is what really is the game-changing moment.
Fantastic. In terms of LEO constellation enabling competitive pricing for airlines who decide to take on that connectivity service, can you talk to me a little bit about what that competitive pricing looks like?
Yeah, I mean, we've always struggled with the fact that if you're flying over a long-haul flight, that the services used to cost tens of dollars. Still today, some airlines are charging $30 to $40 for an international service. We're going to see cost points come way, way down. I mean, at least an order of magnitude lower than it's been historically. So it brings it into the realm of affordability, whether it's for the passenger or for the airline subsidizing the service, to really make it affordable in a way that's not been there either. So I think take rates are going to go up, usage is going to go up. And this, to my mind, really is the defining moment of how we're going to see IFC finally catch up with passenger expectation.
That's great. Alex, I see you kind of nodding in agreement. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think John's right, and for us, we really do what we can, I think, to enable flexible commercial models to enable exactly what John was discussing. Beyond that, if you look, I think, on the supply side of the economics, right, there's a couple things you can do. You can, obviously increase scale, which is what we see in a lot of the roadmaps, and you can also increase efficiency. And that's, I think, where we're really focusing here near term, although there's obviously a long-term scale plan, is how do we make the network as efficient as possible to ship that supply to allow for more competitive pricing?
Great. And a question for Jeff. How important is industry collaboration in order to deliver widespread coverage without compromising that cost or capacity?
That's I think it's absolutely critical to do it well, right? Depending on how you're defining the total industry, right? You have to collaborate with the OEMs. You have to collaborate with the airlines. I think that satellite suppliers, the satellite network operators like Alex, um, for for the for the midterm, let's say the near to midterm, I think you're going to have to cooperate across multiple orbits and multiple constellations for a while because those geopolitical issues still are out there and still will remain out there for some period of time. And so I think there's going to be some challenges there. Uh, so like everything in aviation, it really takes all of us to get the job done. And the more collaboration we have, the better off the airlines and therefore the passengers are going to be. I won't tell you who I flew on this morning, but I flew halfway across the country this morning and couldn't get on the whole flight. So um, we need to try to avoid that frustration. By the way, it wasn't a satellite problem; it was an onboard network problem because I was having an iOS issue. So there you go.
Interesting to hear a real-time issue with it. And Ken, can you kind of speak on this from the airline perspective in terms of what airlines are looking for in terms of cost, capacity, coverage?
Well, yeah. So, you know, the first thing, comes to me is a customer experience. That's what's most important at JetBlue. The customer experience, how we make the best customer experience. And then, of course, we don't charge at all for our internet. So cost is extremely important to us. Um, and also coverage capacity is equally as important. But we really have to look at cost because there's a lot of costs involved. Staying with the current provider, the costs are pretty well fixed, and their costs negotiated a long time ago. So we're paying a lot of money for bandwidth. So, once the new Leos came in like Starlink, Kuiper, OneWeb, and that, we already saw prices are far lower than what we're paying. Um, and we also saw that you get a much better experience with a lower price. And what that does as an airline is really important because that helps defray the cost of switching providers, right? Normally, an airline, the last thing you want to do is remove equipment from your airplane and put new equipment on because those are two huge costs. And the time out of service for the airplane is also a major cost to tunes of tens of thousands of dollars a day per aircraft. So that's very important. So if you look at the savings, um, you can mitigate a lot of those other costs by just the sheer savings alone when you're switching to Leo. So I think you're going to see a lot more airlines willing to remove their existing equipment, whether they're currently in contract or not. But it's going to be easier to remove the equipment and then put this new equipment on the aircraft and still save money at the end of the day. And that's extremely important because it'll provide a better service. The equipment's lighter, the new equipment's much lighter, so it's going to be a weight savings, which is a fuel savings. So there's a lot of benefits to going to Leo other than just the monthly bandwidth cost.
Absolutely. And so you've kind of touched on the cost of these changes, but with airlines like Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Airways, and Air Canada bringing Starlink, OneWeb on board, what are some of the other big changes that you're seeing in the IFC landscape?
So, it's funny, back, let's say maybe 8 years ago, when I first came to JetBlue, we were seeing about a 10-to-1 ratio between the amount of data that was brought down to the aircraft compared to the amount of data going off the aircraft. So 10-to-1. Now it's like 3-to-1, and probably within the next year it'll be 2-to-1, meaning we're having a lot more multitasking going on, and we're doing a lot more interacting with the connectivity on the airplanes right now. With all the social networks and things like that. It's more than just streaming, right? So there's a lot more data going back and forth. And traditional geo has a problem with that, just with the structures. It's difficult to get as much bandwidth up as you take down. But with Leo, that problem is the ratios are a lot greater, meaning with Leo, you can get, let's say if you get a package of 250 megabits down, you'll get probably 100 megabits up. And it's still not quite 2-to-1, but it's much more in line with the way people are using it, because that's the biggest thing is the way people are using data is changed dramatically in the past several years. And really the past 2 years has really changed to the point where we have to kind of look at everything and how we structure it, how we do everything when it comes to, we just signed on with Kuiper. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. We just signed on with Kuiper. So we're looking at how do we, we're looking at building our system from the ground up as far as how do we build the portal? How do we do these things to take advantage of the way things have changed and the way customers are using it differently? And that's very important. So that's something we're definitely going to deeply look at, because Leo changes a lot of things, including, the way you do your portal, the onboard advertising if you're doing it, or monetization if you want to do it. Everything's changed. And but yeah, I mean, to circle back, cost is a huge factor in all this. But going to Leo just really takes a lot of that out of the equation for us.
That's great. Thank you. Um, and John, a question for you. What do you think, as we're seeing this shift to LEO with a lot of airlines, what do you think will happen to airlines who are not bringing LEO on board in terms of passenger response and experience?
Well, I'd go one step back to that, and I would say, okay, what about airlines that don't have connectivity at all right now? And I think that there's been a sea state change. I mean, Ken talked about it a little while ago. The JetBlue is really at the forefront introducing connectivity I'm not saying it's in any disparaging way, Ken. There's not as a flag carrier, but I think they were very forward looking in terms of understanding the importance of connectivity to their passengers and to their customers. What we're now seeing is that it's moving further and further downstream. So we're seeing LCCs and ULCCs also wanting connectivity. And so I think that every airline is going to adopt connectivity. If what we're seeing happening is that the lower tier airlines are now adopting connectivity, the systems they're going to be adopting are going to be LEO, because that's really, I think, where all the energy and all the money, all the investment, all the network capacity is going in. And that is going to put pressure on anybody who's using GEO today to look to do something similar. I mean, a lot of the GEO systems that are out there are getting kind of long in the tooth, if we're honest about it. And so therefore they're ready for a refresh and they're ready for an upgrade. And I think all we're going to see is this migration more and more away from GEO and into primarily LEO, but let's not rule out MEO, because there are people talking about MEO constellations where you get 80% or 90% of the benefits of LEO. So I think we're just going to see this huge refresh cycle in the industry in terms of now's the time to make an upgrade from legacy GEO into something that's different. So I think inside the next decade, I think 95+% of the systems out there are all going to be LEO.
Right. Alex, did you want to add anything?
Sure. So I think in my relatively short experience in the industry, the biggest change I've seen is a shift to free and change in service model. And this was for me always something that was kind of on the horizon and something that was always coming. And it seems to be taking a meaningful path now with LEO service in the North American markets. I think it's going to be exciting that you're gonna see that propagate as people become very accustomed to not just using Wi-Fi, but using the experience that comes with LEO and Wi-Fi, and it becomes more table stakes than anything else. And it's just, I think, remarkable how fast it's now that it's beginning to happen, that it's actually happening, and it'll be exciting to see how that moves down south for me personally into some of the Latin American markets as well.
Fantastic. Ken, just to jump back over to you. So John had said MEO has about 80% of the benefits of LEO. And I know you've spoken about seeing MEO as a path forward for gate-to-gate coverage. Did you want to speak on that?
Well, I think more so it's regarding multi-orbit, right? I think that's where I see a lot of potential in the future is multi-orbit, because a lot of airlines do have these expensive systems on their aircraft already. A lot of them do have the geo systems, and I mean, we at JetBlue are still installing geo systems right now, and a lot of other airlines are too. New deliveries, so you've got that, and you'd be hard pressed to find an airline that can take a 1-year-old system off their airplane. But I think also it lends itself to being able to be part of a multi-orbit solution where, you know, geo is not going to be dead. It's just not going to be as used quite as much. But I think, the way things are pointing is that down the road, we'll see use cases where you can have two systems on the aircraft. In fact, we are kind of designing our system at JetBlue to be able to do that. So we're creating a completely cabin agnostic system so that the The antenna will be a Kuiper antenna, but the interior of the aircraft, all the LRUs inside, the server, the WAPs, everything will be agnostic. So we could add another partner now if we wanted to, and not have a conflict. And that's gonna be important because you'll see in areas where you may not have good LEO coverage because there's still gonna be an issue at heavily congested areas over airports. We fly in some of the most congested airspace daily. Boston through New York, down through DC, into Florida. That's very congested. So we could see where in certain areas, the geo providers can still lay a lot of coverage over specific areas and point beams that way. And that's going to be a big help because it'll help us provide the gate to gate that we promise. Meaning right now we say gate to gate, but a lot of times, um, you know, there's a lot of congestion and the internet's really sluggish around the gates. Um, you add Leo to that, you mix the both together, and I think you'll find that you can almost guarantee that you'll always have coverage no matter where you are, no matter the traffic density, no matter all the other factors combined. G me sorry, multi-orbit will lend itself to that. And what'll happen is I think it'll, you know, don't expect airlines are gonna pay for 2 full services, twice what they're paying now. There's gonna be some sort of, price reworking in the future where because again, supply and demand, and, I can see where the price of LEO will come down, and that'll help knock the price of GEO down. And, you'll get to a point where you can afford to have both networks working simultaneously on the airplane, and it could be where, a person in one seat is streaming a movie on Netflix over GEO, and you're sitting in another seat, going over live spreadsheets on LEO. So that's not too far off in the distant future. We're preparing for that. I know a lot of other airlines are preparing for that eventuality. I know Jeff and his company at ThinKom are looking at that specifically, multi-orbit solution because, gone are the days of an airline signing a 10-year contract with one provider and being locked in. I don't think that'll ever happen again. We're gonna see small 3-year contracts, and you're also gonna see a lot of airlines going towards agnostic equipment because that's really gonna set them up for a good future.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ken. Jeff, did you want to jump in?
Sure, sure. Yeah, thanks for that lead in, Ken. I think you're right. I think it makes sense if you look at the way things are progressing, exactly the way John said, and for the reasons Alex said. You're going to get to a future that is more mobile phone like, right? Where you use the technology that's available in the space that's available and for the quality that's available, but you get a seamless, consistent user experience, right? And that's where it's going to change. There's no reason to ignore multi-billion dollar assets simply because technology changed. You're going to leverage those things in a different way. And the business models are going to adapt in the same way that you don't pay for minutes on your phone anymore, and you don't pay for text anymore. So the cost of a LEO service per bit is substantially cheaper, right? But the overall monthly take actually might be higher depending upon the service that the airline wishes to deliver, right? So I think you're going to continue to see those changes. Of course, with ThinKom, we don't have an axe to grind, regardless of the orbit. Our terminals can talk to any satellite, regardless of that orbit. So I think we're positioned nicely to help bring that forward and go from there. But Leo's an amazing technological shift in the industry, and we're just happy to be part of the whole thing.
Excellent. Yeah, John.
Can I add on to that? Because I love being a little controversial at times, so I'm going to make a little bit of a controversial statement here. So the port problem, as it's affectionately known, whether it's an airport or a maritime port, does exist. That's real. That really happens. However, some of the new constellations in the LEO domain that are being launched are including new technologies such as beamforming and beam steering, where they can lay down many gigabits of capacity over particular regions. So the issue of solving for capacity congestion is not orbitally limited. You can do it. It's more based around the satellite technology itself. Now, here's the other bit of this. A satellite antenna capable of supporting GEO is many times more expensive and heavier and bigger than one that just does LEO only. So if you can solve it all with LEO, then you don't really need GEO because GEO is actually more expensive. And there are people in the GEO world who will tell you that GEO can be cheaper than LEO. That is true as long as you can fill it up. And I contend that with most of the world's new traffic, data traffic going over LEO, there will not be enough use in GEO to fully utilize those GEO satellites. And those billion-dollar assets that are in space, I think will be largely sitting there idling. And if you don't fill them up, they don't become cheap. So my personal view, and perhaps in 5 years' time we can come back and see if I was right or not, is that the economics of GEO are not going to play out for the long term. So, Ken, I know you've got a fleet with GEO assets on it, and I completely understand why you're doing what you're doing today. But I think in the future it's going to change.
Yeah, I can't imagine a lot of airlines, ripping off existing systems and putting on a full GEO and a full LEO system. But I can see a lot of retrofits being done to accommodate them if they already have it.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's great. And Ken, I know you have to jump off shortly. So I do really appreciate you taking the time to be part of the panel. And it was great to have you on here. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, just that, I think things are changing right now faster than ever in this landscape, right? I think, the first, we've had our connectivity going fast, full, and free since 2013, and there's really no change in that, because we were always KA. There's no change in it until about maybe 2 years ago, and then with the advent of LEO, now things are changing on a monthly basis. So I think we just have to be more diligent and watch out, and the key to everything is be flexible and be forward-looking. Airlines can't get caught in a long-term cost or long-term technology because it's gonna change. So we just gotta be ready for that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ken. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much. Appreciate. Sorry I have to leave early, but duty calls.
Thanks, Ken. Take care.
Uh,
So John, back to your point about the weight of antennas. I did have a question for Jeff, kind of on that topic. How are the demands of a LEO system higher in terms of hardware and software? And how do technologies like flat panel or lightweight antennas make LEO IFC more economic for airlines from your perspective?
If you're looking at LEO only today against the other technologies out there, a LEO only antenna can be by the I would argue it's not common knowledge yet, but there are other ways to skim that cat with various technologies. But today, if all you want to do is talk to a LEO, yeah, you can do it in a lighter fashion. Now, in terms of the overall cost of an installation to support a full cabin and everything else, if you look at Starlink as an example, many of Starlink's installations today include two antennas. And therefore, when you're comparing the two antennas to a single antenna elsewhere, in terms of cost and weight, you have a different dynamic, right? So I think that um, it's very murky because obviously none of us share the details with each other out there as to whose antenna weighs what and how this gets installed. But right now, today, if you have to do two installations versus a single installation to achieve what you want to achieve, the math is much more equal. To John's point, if you're trying to talk to a geosynchronous satellite and a LEO satellite at the same time, right? The geosynchronous, the antenna that's required to do that is likely more expensive and heavier than one that's only going to talk to LEOs. But to Ken's point before he left, is that you're locked into that constellation at that point, and only that constellation. One of the things that the industry is doing that that is a bit of a struggle, with the exception of Alex and OneWeb, the other LEO providers are being very single terminal or single antenna, very vertical in their approach, not very collaborative in that way. And I think that could prove to be a problem depending on what that constellation eventually ends up doing or not doing. Right. So if Starlink decided to give all their capacity to the military tomorrow, right? You're gonna wish you had something other than a Starlink only terminal on the airplane. Not that it's a realistic example.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Alex, did you want to speak a little bit about why that sort of collaboration is important?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, part of the reason why we do consider, multiple terminals is exactly, the situation that Jeff mentioned that we're trying to avoid. And obviously the flat panel, ESAs with their, their low profile and their low weight, at least from a LEO perspective are, a significant development. Um, you know, uh, for us, terminal efficiency is really key. We want to make sure the network is being used efficiently, and we're finding that a lot of the terminals that are coming to market are just that, which is really great. And it's only, I think, enabling a higher quality service and in an environment where you have these tiny flat panel antennas. Also, it does open up the avenue to, because they are a smaller profile, if which I personally didn't see coming. If you do want to have multiple terminals on an aircraft, you certainly can. Just size based.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So how important is regulatory harmonization in order for airline passengers to fully experience the benefits of LEO IFC, and what are the steps to get there? John, would you like to start us off on this one?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, you have multiple different forms of authorization that are required from regulators, whether it's just for operating over the airspace or it's operating to the ground below 10,000 feet. So it's an absolute cornerstone of how successful your network's going to be in terms of what I talked about earlier, in terms of its coverage and its consistency. So it's a very key part of the successful deployment of any satellite constellation.
Alex, you're not.
I couldn't agree more, especially when talking with as far as consistency concerned, which is key to the user experience and the passenger's engagement. It's really important that you are able to provide at the different levels, right, that the service can make it all the way to the ground. It's something that's we spent a lot of time on and worked very hard with. Creating and fostering those partnership both in country and with regulators, just to ensure we can deliver that level of consistent service across the board in the regulatory environment that we now operate.
Great. Thank you. And Jeff, kind of from a collaboration standpoint, can you speak on that?
Uh, so our regulatory framework, we obviously fit into half the terminal has to fit into the regulatory frameworks that the likes of the governments and the satellite network operators provide, which is already really pretty consistent. I do think what is changing and what is different is if you look at the regulatory nature on the airplanes or the standards at which you're putting them on airplanes. What you have seen in the last couple of years, which was a bit of a surprise, is that the big constellations and the Starlinks and Kuiper, they're not paying attention to the standards on the airplane. They're creating something different and innovating in a way that the standards didn't allow previously, which I think is a good thing, candidly. The standards are there to protect everybody, to protect the passengers and protect the airlines, but there has to be some flexibility, and I think that's changing as well. As long as we can all collaborate and cooperate on those, I think we'll be in good place. It gets messy if you start putting things on airplanes and then ripping them off and having to rebuild the airplane. So there's good reason to have some standards, but I think the innovations come with people being more innovative on how they install something is generally good. I mean, interestingly enough, our newest solution, we've taken a footprint of a LEO only antenna, all right, and said, okay, what can we do inside there? And we have a solution that fits inside the same footprint as a LEO only, except that it's a It's a multi-orbit terminal. So, okay, that's great. That's great. Forced us to rethink what we were doing, and I think in the way that OneWeb has forced the industry to rethink what it's doing. So.
Great, thank you. And how can airline service providers and satellite operators better collaborate in terms of delivering that unified IFC experience to passengers? John, would you like to start off?
It's a great question. I mean, to make it all work well, there has to be a very tight collaboration between. I mean, a good example of OneWeb and PAC. I mean, we work closely together. They're a satellite operator. We're an ISP. There is a great deal of coordination that happens between the two of us. Whether you're looking at any particular airline deal, I mean, there's a lot of conversation that happens between us and the OneWeb team. We're always looking to make sure that we can deliver the right level of service at the right price points that the airlines are interested in. We also we take a bit of a different view to whether it goes free everywhere. I don't think it goes free everywhere. I think the flag carriers, the tier one carriers, will be giving it away. But it's that's not going to be a viable premise, I don't think, for the LCCs or the LCCs. So we also kind of look at the monetization aspect of things, and whether it's the airline paying, the passenger paying through one or more mechanisms. We think that's all going to be very valid. We don't think that things like the traditional portals go away. We think user friction should be reduced, things like along those lines. But there's a very tight collaboration between us and OneWeb.
Fantastic, thank you. Alex, do you want to speak on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, to John's point, frankly, we depend on our partners for a lot of conversation and feedback from the airlines in a lot of regards, and communicating exactly what they need and what the airlines need in order to deliver the level of service that they want. We regard the ISPs really as the industry or the experts that are closest with the airline, and work very closely with them to ensure that we are not only meeting but exceeding the requirements that are proposed by the airline, both economically as well as from a service level perspective. So I think industry collaboration across the board is really important to us, as a network operator.
Fantastic. And how does the integration of LEO and 5G networks enhance airline crew operational and passenger services? And how can we expect to see those integrations progress in the next couple of years, Alex?
Yeah, so for us, 5G is certainly coming. I think that it's an interesting piece of technology that is going to harmonize with some of the other or some of the terrestrial based technology that's already out there. Obviously, 5G on cell phones. For us, it means greater speeds, and better consistency. And so that, of course, drives user experience, which as Ken was saying frequently, is really the most important thing that we're all here to offer to to the passenger.
Great, thank you. And John, what is the potential for Wi-Fi roaming to create a more seamless IFC experience for passengers?
Huge. It's huge. So I've been a huge believer in Wi-Fi roaming for quite a period of time, and I still do firmly believe that it's going to be quite prevalent in the future, especially amongst those airlines that don't want to be saddled with paying for the entire cost. We've seen a lot of success in the US with the relationship that T-Mobile has developed with airlines like United, Delta, Alaska, and others, where it's one of the most popular add-ons that T-Mobile subscribers look forward to, is the ability to have in-flight Wi-Fi as part of their cellular monthly package. And I think we're going to see that more and more over time. We've launched Wi-Fi roaming with one of our North Asian airline customers. We are seeing, especially in Asia, we're seeing a very high level of interest from a number of airlines there with Wi-Fi roaming. And I think it's going to proliferate quite broadly and quite widely. So we're really excited about what Wi-Fi roaming is going to bring to IFC. passenger just brings that. For people not familiar with it, you just bring your cell phone on board. It connects automatically. It authenticates automatically, and it's just billed straight to your Wi-Fi, your cellular bill, and that's it.
Great, thank you. And as we're wrapping up the discussion, I'd like to give everyone a chance to kind of have their final thoughts expressed, and also ask you about what you believe the ideal scenario looks like for a LEO versus hybrid architecture, and what the path to that is. Jeff, would you like to start?
Well, that's interesting. I don't think that there's an ideal, candidly. I think that there's reality, and you are where you're at today, with respect to the constellations, with respect to the airplanes and the installations. So I think what's going to continue to happen is you're going to adapt through this multi-year period of time. It'll go, it won't go as fast as we want, but it'll go faster than we think, as we continue to move forward. And you're just going to get better and faster. I do think what's going to change probably more, or at least as much as the technology or the business models, is the Wi-Fi roaming. It's how an airline determines their return on investment, and what they want or what they think they need as return on investment, in the same way in which the hotels have done for Wi-Fi in hotel or something like that. So I think you're going to see a lot of continued change in business model, a lot of continued change across time. So medium term, I think, is by definition a period of time where you're going to see a lot of multi-orbit stuff, and there's going to be a future state where there's a more consistent and global infrastructure in place that provides that consistency. 5G is a big part of that. 5G is good for everybody, candidly. So
That's great, thank you. Alex, did you want to touch on this?
Yeah, so I think, our perspective is certainly LEO first. I think it's very airline dependent. It depends on what specifically the airline is looking to do, how they want to monetize, what kind of service they want to offer. I think at the backbone of the core of that is LEO and LEO service. And I think that's the way, things are going to continue to shift. Sure, multi-orbit has a place. I think it's very good in where geopolitical situations are tough. But super long term, I'm pretty confident the LEO is going to be, the backbone of how we provide service and how people do business online these days.
Excellent. And John, did you want to leave us with your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm very much in line with what Alex said. I mean, I think that today, for many airlines, there's a need for, I'll say, multi-orbit. So you're combining GEO and LEO. For me, the future is more likely going to be LEO only than anything. I just look at the amount of investment that's going into the LEO space, and it's clear that those networks will be the ones where the money goes. There was only one single GEO satellite ordered in all of last year. It was an all-time low in terms of ordering GEO satellites. I've heard numbers that are being quoted that say that something like 70% of all maritime traffic is now going over a LEO network. So if that rate of change happens, and with Starlink now at 8 million subs and growing, then it's hard to see how the investment cases for GEO in the future, for the mobility use at least, can really make sense in the future. So I'm very willing to predict a future where we'll see low cost, LEO-only terminals on aircraft, and perhaps two different networks, because airlines are often worried about redundancy and resiliency. And if you put a network from one provider and a network from another one, suddenly you're solving all of that. So it goes back to what Ken's comment was about trying to have the ability to move between network providers. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as you would like. I do think they're going to have the ability to put on different networks, and actually maybe see multiple providers on an airline. But I think there's just so much emphasis and investment going into the development of ESAs and LEO satellites. But I think that's really where we're going to see the future. Certainly, but by the end of this decade, I would expect it will be the rarity to see any new deal being done where there's a GEO component.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining me today for this discussion. It was really great to speak with all of you. And I want to thank Panasonic Avionics for sponsoring this panel. And I'm looking forward to how this conversation will continue to evolve in the coming months. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robynne.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.